Many people spend their entire lives feeling as if they're stuck in a script. They work hard, follow the rules, but in the end, feel that life is something that simply happens to them, as if destiny were a predetermined path and the only option was to follow it. But what if that idea were actually the greatest illusion of all? What if the reality you experience, with all its limits and circumstances, were only a tiny fraction of something immense? There is a kind of knowledge that has been kept for centuries, hidden from school curriculums and common teachings. Knowledge that says you are not a passenger, you are the operator. This changes everything because once you understand this truth, you become capable of shaping your own reality. But the big question is, why isn't this information accessible to everyone? And how is it possible to step out of the role of victim and take total control? To answer that, we first need to uncover the great trap of our perception. Our human experience is, by default, limited to what we call the third dimension. This is our physical reality, ruled by space and by time as we perceive it. Linear, a straight line moving from past to future. From birth, we are conditioned to accept that the only thing real is what our five senses can capture. The chair you're sitting on, the sound of my voice, the screen you're reading, these are all manifestations of the third dimension. And it is within this structure that most people live and die without ever questioning the rules of the game. Our perception of reality is a masterpiece of biological engineering. The five senses, sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste, provide data that the brain processes to build a coherent picture of the world. However, the problem is not in the system itself, but in our absolute trust in it. We believe, without question, that what we can see, touch, and measure is the only thing that exists. This belief traps us in a reality that is actually just a limited projection, a tiny slice of something far greater. What becomes dangerous is that this limitation leads us to operate in a vicious cycle of cause and effect. An external circumstance, a layoff, a financial crisis, a relationship problem, is seen as the cause of our sadness or hardship. We act as if we are mere passengers, reacting to what the world presents. The result is a state of powerlessness. We get stuck in a routine of putting out fires, chasing losses, trying to fix what's already broken, never realizing we're only dealing with effects, not the true cause. This way of living is what we call automatic mode. It's the autopilot billions use every day. They wake up, react to the news, react to traffic, react to others' demands, and go to bed exhausted. Life becomes a series of reactions, and the illusion of control lies in trying to control the effects instead of understanding that the power to create is at a much more fundamental level. This is the real trap. The biggest problem is that this mode of operation steals our ability to act creatively. Instead of shaping the future, we spend all our time trying to fix the past as it appears in the present. If your mind is constantly focused on solving problems that have already happened, there's no energy left to build what you truly want. And this cycle repeats endlessly unless you shift perspective and step out of the idea that you're stuck on a timeline. In the end, three-dimensional life is like watching a movie where you can only see one frame at a time. You don't have the full view of the story or the ability to edit what comes next, because your attention is completely consumed by what's right in front of you. The good news is that the entire film, with all its possible endings, already exists. And true freedom begins when you discover how to access the whole reel. But what exactly is this reel? And how does it fit into our concept of time? The answer lies in the fourth dimension. If the third dimension is where time seems like a straight line, the fourth dimension is where it reveals itself as it truly is, a field. Within this field, every moment, what you lived in the past, what you are living now, and every possible future exists simultaneously. Imagine a roll of film with thousands of frames. The third dimension is the moment you focus on just one frame, believing it's the only reality. The fourth dimension is the understanding that all the other frames are there, waiting to be seen. So the reality you experience isn't the only film available, it's just the one you are projecting. To understand this, think of your life not as a single point in time, but as an entire volume, a complete work already recorded. What we call the future isn't something that needs to be created from scratch. It already exists as one of many possible versions. What you'll do next week, what your life will be in 10 years, all these options are already present in this dimensional field. Your job isn't to create, but to select which one you will inhabit. This brings us to the main key. The ability to navigate this field doesn't depend on luck, destiny, or a mystical gift. The tool to access the fourth dimension is imagination. Not imagination as daydreaming or fantasy, but as a precise and powerful mental faculty. It's the ability to think and feel in terms of a reality that hasn't yet shown up to your five senses, but that you know already exists in the dimensional plane. Many use imagination unconsciously, replaying past fears or creating future anxieties, not realizing that each of those thoughts is a projection. They are, without knowing, choosing and reinforcing the realities they least desire. But once you understand the nature of imagination, you can direct it consciously. You become an operator, no longer a passive dreamer, and that is the fundamental difference. What separates the life you have from the life you want isn't physical effort or time. It's the understanding that you already have the tool to access the dimension where your ideal version of reality is complete. The only thing missing is the correct technique to tune your consciousness to it, and that technique has everything to do with how you use your power of projection. The big question then is, how does imagination project our reality? The answer is simple and, at the same time, revolutionary. The universe is not a separate entity with its own will, judging or deciding what you deserve. It is a perfect, impersonal system of reflection. Think of it like a mirror. A mirror doesn't question your appearance. It simply reflects what you put in front of it. In the same way, reality has no plan for you. It just reflects, with great precision, what your consciousness is projecting. When you understand that you are the projector, not the screen, the game changes completely. Most people spend their lives trying to clean the image on the mirror. That is, trying to change external circumstances, the job, the relationship, the bank account. The real power, however, lies in adjusting the image in the projector. It is your individual consciousness that determines what will appear on the screen of your life. And the fuel of this projection is assumption. The law of assumption is not about naive optimism. It is about an inner conviction. An assumption is a mental premise that you accept as true, even if your physical senses have not yet confirmed it. When you hold the assumption that you are successful, healthy, or loved, the universe has no choice but to reorganize to reflect that new image. It's not magic, it's a universal law. This premise, once rooted in your consciousness, begins to exert an invisible but irresistible influence on every element of your world. The assumption you hold in your mind influences your own behavior, the way you speak, and how you move. And like a dimensional domino effect, it starts to influence people and circumstances around you, inspiring them to act in ways that help manifest your new reality. Obstacles that once seemed impossible dissolve, and unlikely coincidences line up with surgical precision. The skeptic calls it luck, but those who know this law recognize the signature of an assumption materialized. However, this brings an implication few are willing to face. If everything you experience is a reflection of what you project, then there is no place to blame others, the government, the economy, or destiny. The responsibility for every aspect of your life is entirely yours. But this isn't meant to imprison you. It's meant to set you free, showing that you have the power to rewrite the script from the only thing you truly control, your state of being. If reality is so perfectly responsive, why do so many of us live in suffering? If the power to create is innate, why does it feel so limited? The answer to this apparent contradiction lies in a fundamental concept: voluntary forgetting. Think of it as a full immersion experiment. For the life experience to be genuine, consciousness, upon entering this plane, temporarily forgets its creative nature. It's like an actor who immerses so deeply in a role that, for a while, forgets he's only acting. This amnesia is what allows the journey of self-discovery and challenge to have real meaning. It's what makes the human experience genuine. If at every moment you were fully aware that you are the omnipotent creator of your reality, where would be the adventure? Where would be the joy of discovery, of overcoming, of personal growth? Forgetting is what allows the journey to be real, what lets surprises and challenges shape us. It is the condition that makes free will truly meaningful. However, here comes a paradox that few understand. Although we have consciously forgotten our creative nature, the mechanism of creation never stops operating. Every second, through unconscious assumptions, habitual fears, and conditioned mental patterns, each person is literally creating their future reality. Human suffering is not the result of God's punishment. It comes from the chaotic, careless use of this creative power. Many suffer not because they are unlucky, but because, in their ignorance, they are actively creating experiences of suffering. The universe doesn't judge whether you act wisely or destructively. It simply reflects. Acting with fear and worry in front of this mirror results in reflections of fear and worry, not because the universe is cruel, but because it is perfectly faithful to what is projected. It's an elegant system in its simplicity. You receive exactly what you are being. Ignorance of this law is humanity's great tragedy, as many run this powerful mechanism blindly, creating by default instead of by design. But to change this pattern, we must dig into what drives us. Many philosophies and religions preach that desire is the source of all evil. But for those who understand the nature of creation, desire is the very source of life. And that is what we need to discuss now. Many doctrines, whether religious or philosophical, teach that desire is the root of all suffering and that to achieve peace, we must eliminate it. This view, however, is an incomplete understanding of the mechanics of creation. Desire is not a weakness to overcome, but the fundamental driving force of all reality. Without desire, we wouldn't move a finger. It's what pushes us, what makes us seek, innovate, and evolve. It is the master spring of existence. Think carefully. The only desires that truly move you to act are those that capture and hold your attention persistently. Thousands of fleeting, superficial desires drift through your consciousness every day, but only those that root in a deep longing gain the strength to reshape reality. And this brings us to something many prefer to ignore. Every desire, without exception, carries some personal gain. There is no completely altruistic desire. This seemingly selfish nature is not a flaw in the system. It is exactly what allows individual creation to work. Universal consciousness itself fragmented into individual perspectives precisely to experience the joy of desiring, seeking, and achieving through each of us. The key to progress and the fulfillment of your dreams lies in radical obedience to desire, not the superficial, fleeting kind, but the one that rises from your deepest center and refuses to be silenced. When such a desire appears, we must understand that its very emergence already signals the existence of a path to its fulfillment. To desire something specific is, on the dimensional plane, the same as already possessing it. Desire is not a search for what is missing, but proof that what you seek already exists as a real possibility, waiting for your conscious selection. The only step left is to assume the feeling of the desire fulfilled. This is not pretending or self-deception. It is the recognition that on the fourth dimensional level where all futures coexist, you are tuning your consciousness to the frequency of the reality you have chosen to experience. The universe, acting as a perfect mirror, must then rearrange every necessary element to externally manifest what you are already holding internally. Now that we understand the central role of desire, the question that matters is not, "What do I want?" but, "What would I feel if I already had it?" This question leads directly to the practical method for turning that feeling into reality, the true engineering of creation. What I will describe now is not a mystical ritual but a technology of consciousness, a precise method for mental engineering. And the first step of this engineering is precision. Vague desires like, "I want to be happy" or "I want to be successful" don't work because the universe, like a quantum computer, doesn't process ambiguous commands. You need to know exactly what you want. What is your goal? You must be specific. Once you define your goal with total clarity, the next, more subtle and crucial step is building the scene. Most people make the mistake of visualizing the process, the effort, the path to the goal, when in reality it's the opposite. You must create a single, brief, mental scene that implies the fulfillment of your desire, and that would naturally happen after it was already a fact. For example, if you desire a promotion at work, don't imagine yourself receiving the news in a meeting. Instead, imagine, for example, a scene weeks after getting the promotion. The idea here is to visualize what you want as if you already had it. If your desire is to own a home, don't imagine the loan approval. Picture yourself months later, inviting friends for a barbecue in your backyard and feeling the grass beneath your feet. The scene can be a simple event, but one that proves unmistakably that your desire was fulfilled. This is like a dimensional shortcut because the fourth dimension does not recognize linear time. When you focus on the after, you already put yourself in the mental state of someone who has achieved it. This is the secret to avoiding anxiety and the feeling of lack. It is the difference between trying to attract something and already feeling like its owner. The success of this method doesn't depend on how long you spend visualizing, but on the quality of your immersion. And the quality of the immersion depends on a specific state of consciousness that most of us have lost. For your mental projection to have strength, it needs to be done in the right state of consciousness. The most powerful moment for this practice is not during the day amid the noise of the world, but during the transition between waking and sleep. This is the threshold of sleep, a state where the physical body is relaxed, but the mind is still conscious and malleable. At this point, the veil between dimensions becomes thinner, and your imagination, freed from the constraints of sensory perception, has its creative capacity maximized. To reach this state, you must aim for total immobilization of the body. You can lie in a comfortable place or sit in a chair and relax every muscle from your feet to the top of your head. The intention is not to force sleep, but to let the body fade from your focus. When the physical body is still, the mind naturally becomes more mobile and receptive. This is the key to dimensional action, which requires no physical effort but precise mental discipline. In this deep relaxation, focus on the scene you built. But here is the distinction that separates those who get results from those who merely dream. You must not be a passive spectator, watching the scene as if it were a movie. You must be an active participant. You need to be inside the scene, feeling it through your own imaginary eyes. Feel the texture of things, hear the sounds around you, and, most importantly, feel the emotions that would come with the fulfillment of your desire. This total immersion is what gives your projection the weight of reality. For the fourth dimension, there is no difference between a vivid experience in imagination and a physical experience. Both are equally real. Therefore, the most important part of this process is to hold this scene with such intensity and feeling that it becomes more real than the world your senses show you. At that point, you stop being an observer of reality and become a conscious creator. The most challenging part of the process is not the practice itself, but what happens after you finish. You have made your projection, immersed yourself in the scene of your fulfilled desire, and gone to sleep with that feeling. Then, the next day, you wake up to a world that, apparently, is the same as before. But this is when your conviction is truly tested. The biggest obstacle for most people is not lack of power, but impatience. Impatience is what kills most dreams. The law of creation, like the law of nature, has its own timing. There is a gap between the mental planting and the physical harvest, and this gap is the test of your intention. The universe, the mirror of your consciousness, needs time to reorganize. That's why this practice requires what modern society despises most: sustained mental discipline without immediate guarantees. You need to learn to live in two realities simultaneously. By day, you move through the three-dimensional world, fulfilling your obligations and dealing with what your senses show. But internally, you live in the assumption that your desire is already a fact. This is a form of dimensional engineering. The external world will continue to present its limiting evidence, and people will continue to behave according to your old version. But you must be like a conductor who ignores the audience's noise to focus on the inner melody. Every time the external reality screams that nothing has changed, you must respond internally with calm conviction that the change is already complete on the plane that truly matters. It is your ability to maintain this inner vision, despite the external clamor, that determines the speed of manifestation. The practice now is not just about imagining, it is about sustaining. And it is this persistence that leads us to the deepest implication of all this knowledge. If life is a reflection of the assumptions we hold, then every experience, good or bad, is a direct consequence of our projections, conscious or not. This revelation eliminates the possibility of blaming circumstances, other people, or any external force. We are the only ones responsible for every aspect of our existence. For most, this idea is terrifying because it takes away the comfort of outsourcing blame. But for those seeking true freedom, this is the only answer that matters. After all, if circumstances were the cause, we would always be at the mercy of a chaotic, uncontrollable world. However, if your inner state of being is the cause, then the power to change is always in your hands, regardless of what happens outside. At every moment, we stand at a kind of dimensional crossroads. We can choose to react to what our senses show, perpetuating the past into our future, or we can choose to respond from the state of consciousness we decide to embody, creating the new. The first option is what most people do, operating in reactive mode and reinforcing the cycle of cause and effect. The second is the conscious choice of the creator, who understands that reality is malleable and that their next experience is determined by their next assumption. The universe, what some call the quantum field, responds with absolute precision to your command, but the command must come from you. Expecting the universe to decide your destiny is like sitting in front of a turned-off computer waiting for it to write your paper. The power is always in your hands, and you are the one who must press the on button. But why does society insist on keeping us in the role of victim? The answer is brutally simple. It's infinitely easier to control a population that believes it's a hostage of circumstances. A people who understand their individual creative power become ungovernable. The social system as we know it depends on our ignorance. It depends on the idea that we are weak, that we need an intermediary, whether a religion, a government, or an economic structure to save us from chaos. That's why, historically, true wisdom has been restricted to small circles, and when it becomes public, it's systematically ridiculed. It's sold as magical thinking or naive self-help. Learned helplessness, the belief that we cannot change our destiny, is promoted as realism. It's an old trick that still works perfectly, keeping countless people on autopilot, creating realities they don't want simply because they don't know they have a choice. The urgency to apply this knowledge has never been greater, but not because of some cosmic event or the end of the world. The urgency comes from a more personal and sobering fact. Every day lived in ignorance of this power is a day creating by accident instead of by design. How many unwanted futures are being selected right now by people who have no idea they have the power to choose? But don't treat what has been said here as just another interesting theory to store in your mind. This is an ancient knowledge, a precise tool for the conscious manipulation of reality. Transformation doesn't happen when you believe what was said, but when you apply it. Everything shared here is not merely philosophy or an interesting theory. It is an operating manual for your consciousness. The only question that remains is, are you ready to take that responsibility? Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, but now. The first step toward freedom is not a grand act, but a simple gesture of discipline. So start tonight, before sleeping. Choose a specific desire. Create the single short scene that would imply its fulfillment. Lie down, relax your body, and enter the state between waking and sleep. Immerse yourself in the scene, not as an observer, but as an active participant. Feel it, see it, hear it, until it becomes real to you. Do it with the same seriousness as you would follow a medical prescription to save your life, because, in a very real sense, that is exactly what you are doing. Do not look for external confirmations in the first days or weeks. The gardener who plants the seed does not dig it up daily to check its progress. Trust the law as you trust gravity. The evidence of the three-dimensional world will shout that nothing has changed, but this is your opportunity to prove to yourself that your inner vision is more powerful than the external noise. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to like and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with others so they can benefit from this message. And don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, reflections, and experiences. Thanks again for watching and for joining me. Take care and see you soon.